Okay, so picture this. You open a book that's like 700 years old, and what you find inside isn't just words. It's this vivid, almost hallucinatory vision, a world packed with powerful, mysterious symbols, a whole spiritual landscape filled with strange figures and hidden meanings. That's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to crack the code of a medieval vision. We're about to unpack some really intense and, let's be honest, kind of bizarre imagery from a medieval religious text. Now, this isn't just a random jumble of images, it's a carefully constructed allegory, a spiritual roadmap, really. The big question is, where is it trying to lead us? Well, together, we're going to figure that out. And that really is the big question, right? When you're faced with images this complex, this symbolic, you can't help but just stop and ask, what is the message here? That's the mystery we're setting out to solve. Okay, first things first, let's set the scene. The vision kicks off with a very specific and, yeah, pretty strange structure. A wall. It's bow-shaped and looks like grating. And it's described as being exactly 3 cubits high. Now, this isn't just some random architectural detail. Trust me, every single piece of this scene is just dripping with symbolism. And of course, what's a stage without its actors, right? So let's meet the cast of characters in this vision. It's populated by a whole series of allegorical figures, and each one is the living embodiment of a particular virtue. But they are definitely not what you might expect. So first up, we see a woman. And get this, on her breast is a lion, described as being as bright as a mirror. This really striking figure represents the virtue of bountifulness. A lion for bountifulness? I know, it sounds a little weird, but hang in there. There's a really powerful reason for this choice. Nearby, there's another figure, and this one represents prudence. Hanging from her neck is a serpent, coiled around a little twig. You know, a serpent is always a loaded symbol, so its presence here is a huge clue for understanding what this virtue is all about. And then, wow, we get maybe one of the most powerful images in the whole vision. A third figure, the virtue of abstinence, is literally crushing the monstrous and hideous head of a man right under her feet. I mean, it's an incredibly vivid picture of triumphing over evil. What a statement. And these figures, they're not just silent statues, no way. They have a voice. That virtue of abstinence, the one doing all the crushing, she declares this, giving us this raw, visceral sense of her purpose. She isn't passive at all. She is actively and violently rejecting evil. She is not messing around. So with all this talk of crushing and spitting and fighting, it becomes pretty clear these figures aren't just posing. They're combatants in a cosmic war. This whole vision, it's like a snapshot of a divine battle being waged for the human soul itself. And this wasn't just some old story for the medieval reader, you know? This was a live battlefield. The vision clearly lays out the enemy, the deceptions of the devil, and then showcases the virtues as the champions fighting on humanity's behalf. You know, this whole struggle is also deeply, deeply personal. Another voice in the vision, the virtue of peace, expresses this internal conflict. It's a great reminder that the battle isn't just out there. It's also about resisting the temptation inside all of us to just avoid the hard stuff, a vulnerability the devil can definitely exploit. All right, so we've got the weird setting, the symbolic characters, and this epic battle they're fighting. But how do we actually unlock what it all means? Well, it turns out there's a key. A single central idea that makes the whole thing just click into place. And here it is. This is the code we've been looking for. The entire vision, the whole shebang, is a massive allegory for the transition from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Remember that wall from the beginning? That represents the old law of Moses, strict, confining. But these virtues, these figures, they represent a totally new path of salvation through faith, grace, and the Word of God. So now that we have the master key, we can go back and unlock everything else. Let's revisit those strange symbols from the start, because suddenly, they're all going to start making perfect sense. Okay, that bow-shaped wall, remember that? It symbolizes the old precepts and the Jewish people under the law of Moses. The text even calls it hard, like grating. And this is crucial. It was not pierced with the door of the Word of God, meaning it lacked that path to mercy that you find in the new faith. And what about the lion on the breast of bountifulness? Well, that represents Jesus Christ, the strongest lion. The fact that it's shining so brightly like a mirror symbolizes that pure, divine righteousness and truth that a bountiful soul holds within their heart. The serpent is super interesting. Here, it's not just a symbol of pure evil. It specifically represents the cunning and the slyness of the devil. So the virtue of prudence doesn't just destroy it, she controls it. She masters it with patience and heavenly love, just like Christ overcame temptation in the desert. And that monstrous head getting trampled? This one's about as direct as it gets. It is the devil himself, and all his lies and falsities being decisively crushed by the virtue of abstinence. It's a clear, powerful image of victory over temptation. So when you assemble all these decoded pieces, what's the big picture? Well, this vision isn't just some bizarre story. It's a map. It's a visual guide for the faithful, showing them the spiritual battlefield, identifying the enemy, and introducing the virtues they need to cultivate to achieve salvation. So the bottom line is this. The message for a medieval audience was crystal clear. The old ways are done. The new path requires an active, constant fight against evil. Salvation isn't passive. It's won by embracing virtues like prudence and abstinence, who act as defenders of the soul, all guided by God's ultimate justice and mercy. So there you have it. That's how you crack the code of a medieval vision. For people hundreds of years ago, this was a powerful map of meaning, a symbolic guide for navigating the spiritual world. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. In our own, very complex world, what are the symbols, the allegories, the maps of meaning that we use to guide ourselves today?